What's up everyone, it's Dakota and welcome back to another video, and today we're going to be adding another card to the unfortunate playlist of Why Nobody Plays. If you are new to the channel and you are wondering what the heck Why Nobody Plays is, means, whatever, it's not to be taken in the literal sense. Magic is a very expansive game, there are tons of formats, and there's just tons of people out there that are like playing cards. The Why Nobody Plays refers to essentially like these cards or decks just seeing very little to no play at all in their respective formats that they are legal in. So for Elspeth Sun's Champions case, it's like legal in Pioneer, legal in Modern, Legacy, so on and so forth, and it virtually sees no play across any of those formats, at least in a competitive sense. I'm sure there's probably some people that play like Blue-White Control or some variants of it in like each format. Like I believe Elspeth Sun's Champion, like in the early days of Pioneer, like I played a copy of it in mine, but with all the other blue-white planeswalkers that have come out, Elspeth Sun's Champion is kind of obsolete. So we'll kind of like detail a little bit like the rise and fall of Elspeth Sun's Champion, explain like why, back in the day or at one point like why it was like a very powerful card, very good card, etc., and kind of detail why it's kind of fallen out of favor in kind of a longer format. But before I get into that, of course, if you are not already subscribed to the channel and you want to see more videos like this, you want to see some modern Pioneer content, going over different decks, playing them, so on and so forth, even when like I live stream, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, ring the notification bell so you get those notifications of when I go live and when I post new videos. Also, there's a link in the description to the Discord server that I run. Feel free to copy that link, follow it, and go ahead and join. That would be greatly appreciated. So Elspeth Sun's Champion, for a lot of people that played back in the day, I mean, Theros was released back in September 27th of 2013. I mean, we're coming up on 10 years since the original Theros set and essentially the start of Theros block, which is like crazy to me because I started playing like probably not even like a year after this set came out. I think I started around like M15, but anyway, Elspeth Sun's Champion uh, was like this was like the standard of like planeswalkers. Like this, there's a lot of like really good planeswalkers. You had like Garruk Wildspeaker, which was a very powerful planeswalker, and I think was probably like one of the best planeswalkers for a long time. And then with like the different rulings and stuff in Magic, you had Jason Bellerin, which was like the best one, which we can detail like the old planeswalker rules later, because they are not the ones that we get to play with today. Which thank God, because the new rules we have are awesome. Anyway, with Elspeth Sun's Champion, a lot of people remember a few things from like Theros Block. Theros Block was home to the devotion mechanic, and like standard just being like very powerful, like mono black devotion. You had mono blue devotion. You had mono green devotion with like a hint of red, kind of towards like the later cycle of like Theros Block and things like that, just because you had some more powerful like green spells. I know with like M15, like Genesis Hydra was printed, so like mono green got a boost there. Blue-white control was, I don't think necessarily like a tier one deck, but like if you were a good control player, like you could play like blue-white or like Esper control and be okay. And Elspeth Sun's Champion was essentially a card that could do it all, a planeswalker that could do it all. And like, well, nowadays it's not like a surprise that a planeswalker can just like win the game on its own, but like this card in particular was very much like I'm going to win the game on my own. So breaking it down, it's a 6 mana 4 loyalty planeswalker with a +1 to put 3/1/1 white soldier creature tokens onto the battlefield, a -3 that destroys all creatures with power 4 or greater, and a -7 that gives you an emblem with creatures you control get +2/+2 and have flying. So right off the rip, as we have found out, like from planeswalkers like Oko, from even like Teferi, Hero of Dominaria to a point, some of those cards that have a plus ability attached to them, starting with a decently high amount of loyalty and a plus that allows you to defend themselves, is very powerful. And it's one key piece to why Elspeth Sun's Champion was a very powerful planeswalker. You had cards like Desecration Demon, which on each combat basically like force an opponent to sacrifice a creature, and if they did, they would get to tap the Desecration Demon, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Elspeth Sun's Champion essentially like got to trade one of the 1/1 soldiers it got to make to keep a Desecration Demon tapped down, and Demon hated Elspeth Sun's Champion because it would just get to constantly tick up, tick up, tick up, and then, eventually it got to a point where like, okay, like I can -2 get rid of the demon because I don't want to sacrifice my creature tokens, or basically like at its benefit, like it can keep it locked down, and if it couldn't keep the demon locked down without getting pressured itself, just minus blow up the board, and your 1/1s get to stick around, which is awesome. The fact that -3 just wasn't like a blanket destroy all creatures. I think that would actually probably be pretty powerful, like on a 4-mana planeswalker, just to destroy all creatures, and even just leaving it with like 1 loyalty in play. Uh, but the fact that the plus to defend itself and the minus was also able to defend itself, but they kind of played with each other because you could just go plus then minus. You have 2/3 soldiers in play, get to pressure your opponent's life total, and so on. And the -7, if you like kind of pay attention to like what it's doing, you can make like 9 soldiers, emblem, and then you have like 27 power, essentially 27 flying power, which in theory can like end the game, without any like opponent life gain, so on. So for the time, this card was very powerful. And as it went on in standard up until like the bitter end, if you were playing a deck that was playing white, even when Khans of Tarkir started to come out and Elspeth Sun's Champion was getting towards its end of life in standard, if you were like a more mid-rangey control deck, you probably played some number of Elspeth Sun's Champion. If you're a control deck, you absolutely played Elspeth Sun's Champion, just because the amount of value you got from this card is just insurmountable. If your opponent couldn't trample over the 1/1s, like the 1/1s just stonewalled like forever, like just absolutely stonewalled like the aggressive decks. And for people that like played during the time, like Blue White Control, which ended up winning the Pro Tour, Magic 15, like of course like the core set after Theros block, but it finally had the tools to where it could just kind of take over and dominate a format. And I mean, Blue White Control was one of the most dominant decks to be playing at that time. And it was kind of anchored by Elspeth Sun's Champion. Of course, you had like a lot of other good blue-white cards. I mean, you had like Sphinx's Revelation from like Return to Ravnica. You didn't necessarily need a win condition in your deck. You could play like Elixir of Immortality, but Elspeth Sun's Champion was a way that you could just like outright end the game. Now you run your opponent out of resources. You're up on so many cards, like they're never going to resolve a spell. They're not going to be able to keep a creature in play. Elspeth Sun's Champion is just going to end the game right away, and just kind of like play that role of like, I'm a win condition, but I'm also a control condition to just kind of like keep the game under wraps and make it very hard for you and make it even more narrow of cards that you need to essentially take back over the game and kind of get to parity or even try to get ahead. So the fact that like back in 2013, 2014, even up to like 2015, like Elspeth Sun's Champion was just this like very powerful planeswalker that we really wouldn't see until like later, when we would start getting into like the Battle for Zendikar sets, and we would see like Gideon ally of Zendikar, which ended up being like a huge role player in standard as well, just being an efficient planeswalker that could defend itself. And like Elspeth was kind of like the precursor to that, and was like a $30 card, I can remember, because when I started playing I was like, this card's awesome, I need it for my deck, and found out it was $30, and I was like, there's no way I'm going to be getting into this game that heavy. And look where I am now. So obviously there's a lot of high praise for Elspeth Sun's Champion. Like, this card to me is like iconic for the time. I mean, it's again like not only just powerful, but it was just kind of like the face of like its own deck, like its own tier 1 deck, on top of just like being one of the first cards where I was like, I really really want this card. So what the heck happened to it? Well, as I kind of alluded, planeswalkers have gotten more efficient and they've gotten more powerful, and their plus effects are probably a little bit better than Elspeth. Like, I would say like getting to make 3/1/1s is pretty good. The fact that like we have a lot of like big creatures. Like you can't like your opponent plays like a 2 mana 3/3 or whatever 3 mana 3/3, so on. And you getting to like kind of block with all these 1/1s to like try to force trades and stuff, and things like that. Like it just doesn't happen. Like there's a lot of like powerful creatures that just have trample built into them for like a cheap aggressive cost, or like small creatures can't block like some of the bigger creatures. Menace being a little bit more prominent on some of the other cards and stuff that we see in the format. That just getting to make 3/1/1s isn't like I make 3/1/1s, I block 3 creatures. It's I make 3/1/1s, I block your 1 creature, and my Elspeth takes 2 damage. It's not nearly as good as like what it was. And while like the minus to destroy, creatures power 4 or greater is great, it was really good when like you could make a tokens and then do it. Obviously, if you get 1 or 2 activations or even 3 before getting to do it, you just don't have the time anymore with how fast like the formats are. Pioneer, while it isn't like necessarily a blazing fast format, I mean it can be if like your mono green opponent, mono green devotion opponent, or like your mono red burn, whatever. Like those decks can kind of win like super explosively, even like Lotus Field and stuff like that. Which Elspeth Sun's Champion obviously has a hard time trying to get to that point when it's not a card nowadays that is going to absolutely put so much pressure on your opponent that like they have to find an answer for this and then try to win. They can just win through it. I mean, like honest to God, like they could just win through it, and like trading, like spending 6 mana for like a card that like is not going to be as good as say something like Farewell, where you can also deal with like the graveyard, deal with like your artifacts, enchantments, and creatures as well. There's just other cards that for the mana cost end up doing the things that Elspeth Sun's Champion wants to do, but doing them better and having like more cases where it's better to have that card than Elspeth. On top of that, like control win conditions have just gotten better. Teferi Hero of Dominaria, the fact that it's a essentially like initial 5 mana investment, but as long as like you're gonna get to plus it, like it's essentially a 3 mana planeswalker, and like protects himself in that way by giving back mana to you, and then getting to untap with it is just insane because getting to draw an extra card every turn, getting to like essentially cast like spells for free. Like you end up having 6 lands on turn 6, and then like you cast a 4 mana spell, like maybe a memory deluge, and then you get to untap, and then you have 4 lands untapped, and there's just the possibilities are endless for what you could have for that mana on top of getting to do other things. I can go on and on of like the different amalgamation of things that you can do with a 5 mana Teferi Hero of Dominaria that you can't do with 6 mana Elspeth Sun's Champion. Power creep I think is always like the simple and easiest answer for why some of these older cards just don't work. But like in a vacuum, Elspeth Sun's Champion is still a very powerful card. And while yeah, like power creep is definitely one of the answers to why this card is not good anymore, its services really just aren't as powerful as like some of the other planeswalkers at even like the same or cheaper mana cost. So it's really a shame because like again, this is like one of my favorite cards of all time, like Elspeth Sun's Champion, playing with Siege Rhinos and things like that. you know Probably like one of my favorite decks, probably one of the most satisfying decks like to play. And Elspeth Sun's Champion doesn't even follow, like it doesn't even slot into like the Pioneer version of like the deck that it was once like dominant in. And hate to see it like fall this far from grace, but at the same time, like it's exciting for Magic. It's not fun playing with cards from like 10, 15, 20 years ago that might be in like a shorter print and stuff like that. So like the fact that like there is sort of kind of like a rotation where like cards are just kind of getting better, they're getting leaner, they're getting faster, they're getting better, and like at this point, like I think like while Pioneer and Modern are like kind of stale for the fact that like there hasn't been like any bannings, the formats are pretty diverse. I would say Modern more so than Pioneer, but that's also because like I was playing Modern like well before Pioneer was even really a format. So while unfortunate, Elspeth Sun's Champion is more than likely never going to see any serious like tournament play or success, for probably the rest of time, unless there's something like special to do with like the Elspeth like archetype and stuff like that. I still definitely have a lot of fond memories, and I'm sure other players also have some really fond memories of playing with Elspeth Sun's Champion and some other people, like lie awake at night, wake up in a cold sweat because they hear Elspeth Plus, and then they're just like, ah, things happen. Sometimes cards like do horrible things to us, and Elspeth Sun's Champion is definitely one of those few cards that I can remember, like genuinely like people were kind of like afraid of at the time. So let me know in the comments down below what you think of Elspeth Sun's Champion. If you have any good memories of like playing the card, maybe some like annoying memories playing against it, so on. I would love to hear it, talk about Magic and stuff like that. So if that has any interest to you, please leave a comment down below. And then also, again, consider subscribing to the channel and ringing the notification bell so you know when these videos get posted. That's going to do it for me. I hope you all enjoyed, and I hope to see you all in the next video.